We have quite a super fan group.
We have a super fan group.
Our rookies, we want to thank Earl Dyer, Wendell Wood, Brad Waldron, Sione, and Mary Inoki. I think I've been pronouncing Inoki. I think I've been pronouncing it wrong. Sione just did a podcast with you, and he said it different.
I was listening intently. I'm like, how does he pronounce his last name?
I think he's Inoki. I don't know.
And real quick, before you jump on to the next one, talking to Sione, he and I got some stuff up our sleeves. So I can't wait to share with the listeners a little bit about what we've got planned.
Yeah, his podcast came out Monday. You want to check it out. Want to thank our pro level subscribers, Justin Robbins, Gary Thurston, and Flo Grant. Thank you to our pros and our champion level, Shad and Freya Robison. Thank you for our Patreon. You guys help make this podcast possible. If you are interested in becoming a Patreon subscriber, check out patreon.com/Addict II Athletes. See if there's a fundraising platform that works for you. There's as little as $2 a month, and it helps give back to us to keep this stuff going.
Absolutely. And, I really do want to just champion, again, what we do on that Patreon page. There's a lot of in-depth, deeper content there that's kind of based off of some therapeutic approaches and some stuff that I think gives me an opportunity to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some content, which is awesome. So jump on there and check it out. $2 a month, everything right there, at your fingertips. Marissa, our athletic events this summer are already up for registration. Our first one in June, the No One Left Behind Team Half Marathon.
Yes, it is June 15th in Spanish Fork, Utah. Team Half Marathon. This is not a relay. It's a team race. Teams of 3. You're going to start together, finish together. The point is to do it as a team. Just like in recovery, we can't do it alone. So gather those friends and family around you that can support you in reaching a goal. And that's going to be a half marathon. It's on the Spanish Fork River Trail. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's really nicely priced compared to most half marathons. You can get all signed up, and we would love to have you join us June 15th.
And just so you guys know, there's some awesome stuff happening. We've got a brand new No One Left Behind logo and medal coming out. So the last 2 years, you've kind of had the same thing because the first one was a very small kind of testing team marathon. This last year's was huge. And so, we can't keep giving you the same stuff. So there's going to be awesome new logos and team finishing medals. So it's going to be epic, you guys. So jump on. We'd love to have you there. But anyway, today we're going to do a little bit of a menagerie. There's quite a few topics that we want to touch base with, some stuff that we've thought about, but also some stuff that's come from you, the listeners. The first thing I want to do is just give a shout out to our little stinker, Savannah Robinson, formerly the minor league podcast host, right?
Our teen and parent podcast.
Yep. She graduated into the adulthood, unfortunately, a couple weeks ago, and now is an adult at the ripe age of 18.
Yes.
And thinks she's 25. So, she's got a lot of stuff on her horizon. But, she came to me and Marissa, about 2 months ago?
Yeah.
And, she's taking a public speaking class, and she's a very good public speaker anyway.
She is.
But the funny thing about it is she needed to take, I think the premise of the assignment in public speaking was to take a legitimate speech.
Historical speech.
A historical speech. And kind of, without taking away the theme or the cadence, to change it enough to make it applicable to a modern day issue.
Yep.
And as she was telling us about this, she was talking about, maybe I can do a this versus that kind of thing, or maybe I can
asking for ideas,
do kind of something that's funny, and she settled on Martin Luther King's speech that was given right during the Vietnam War.
Yes, it's called A Time to Break Silence.
A Time to Break the Silence, yeah. And oh my gosh, when she asked us for some input, and we decided, I said, what you should do is maybe talk a little bit about, because the theme of Martin Luther King Jr.'s talk for that was about how us as citizens need to kind of be a little bit more aware and involved with what's going on with the people that make the decisions, and to not just kind of sit back and hope it all works out, but to do something.
Yeah.
And she decided to do it on the opiate epidemic. And, my goodness.
Yeah, we helped her do some of the editing for some of the specific data, but she also did not only have to rewrite it, but she had to memorize it. And this, I think it needed to be 3 minutes, and hers is,
I think if she would slow her cadence down.
She speaks fast, but for most people, it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a very long speech, and to be able to memorize it and be able to share it the way she has been practicing and doing is incredible.
And so she did that. She practiced it and she delivered it to the class. And then her teacher put a little cherry on top and said, now you have to go and present it to a live studio audience.
Not just in class.
Not just in class. And so last night at our Addict II Athlete home-based meeting, she presented this topic to the athletes that were in here for the meeting. And man, every time I hear this, I just get put into tears.
I get teary-eyed.
And we're gonna share it with you, the listeners. And there's a video posted on our social networking out there. But the interesting thing that I took from this too, Marissa, is that they've grown up in Addict II Athlete. They've grown up with us being, like within the service world of therapeutic, like involvement and
understanding and talking about addiction and mental health issues since they were little.
Yeah. And with our oldest daughter Brooklyn, who does all the editing and does a lot of our videography, and Savannah, who's done the podcast and comes out and does this kind of stuff, I'm blown away at how much the kids have picked up about what we're passionate about. It's like I posted this and I said something to the tune of, when your kids are watching you so closely, that they begin to understand the mission that your life is becoming, and then they buy into it. To me, that is one of the most humbling things in the world. Yeah,
because they recognize the importance and the need. And Savannah has, with many things, talked about, substance abuse issues that friends and peers of hers have had, and that she's able to talk to them about things and kind of relate and understand and, kind of share with them, like, ask for help. Like, you're doing this because there's a need there. And, what can I do to help you? Which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to let you listen to her quick little speech. Remember, her cadence is a little quick. She follows after her dad and speaks real fast. And then we always tell people that, no, you just listen too slow,
I guess.
But yeah, it's a speech that she modeled after Martin Luther King Jr.'s, what is it?
A Time to Break the Silence.
Time to Break the Silence. And man, what an excellent job she's done.
Yeah.
Let me pull this up.
Martin Luther King, I don't know if he wrote his own stuff, if he had a writer, it's phenomenal.
He wrote his own stuff.
And wow.
Powerful. So let's make sure this goes through. So I'm going to start it, and then, let's make sure everyone can hear it.
The truth of these words is beyond doubt, but the situation America finds itself in is a most difficult one. Even when pressed by the demands of inner truth, men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in the times of an opioid health epidemic. Nor does a human spirit move without great difficulty against all the apathy of the conformist thought within one's own bosom and in the surrounding world. Moreover, when the current issues at hand seem as perplexing as they often do in the case of this epidemic, we are currently losing 301 people a day from legal and illegal overdose of opioids. Most concerning, fentanyl. Yet America still seems mesmerized as to why, but we must move forward. And for some of us who've begun to break the silence of the night, have found that the calling is often falling on deaf ears, but we must speak. We must speak with all the humility that is appropriate to our future vision of decreasing this overdose rate. We must speak. And we must rejoice as well, for surely this is the first time in our nation's history that a significant number of politicians and leaders have chosen to move beyond the ignorance of the issue and become actively engaged in a solution. Perhaps a new collective response is rising among us. If it is, let us trace its movements and pray that our own inner being may be sensitive to its guidance, for we are deeply in need of a new way beyond the darkness that seems so close around us. Over the past decades, as we the people have moved to break the betrayal of our own silences and speak from the burnings of our own hearts, we have called for radical departures, from ignoring big pharmaceutical companies to holding them accountable. Many elites have often questioned this movement and its wisdom. At the heart of their concerns, this issue has often loomed large and loud. Why should we care about the drug addicts? Why worry about people with no self-control? There's only an extremely small percent that actually become addicted, they ask. And when I hear them, though I often understand the source of their concern, I am nevertheless greatly saddened, for such questions mean that the inquirers have not really understood the issues or problems at hand, or the 301 deaths per day. Indeed, their questions suggest they do not know the world in which they live. In the light of such tragic misunderstanding, I deem it of signal importance to try and state clearly and trust consciously why I believe that addressing the opioid epidemic is crucial for America, as it impacts public health, strains healthcare systems, increases crime rates, affects families and communities, and has significant economic costs. I come to this platform today to make a passionate plea with my beloved peers. This speech is not addressed to the pharmaceutical companies or the healthcare providers. It is not addressed to the regulators or the culture of overprescribing. Neither is an attempt to overlook the role they must play in the successful resolution of the problem. While they all may have justifiable reasons to be suspicious of the good faith of the citizens of the United States, life and history give eloquent testimony to the fact that conflicts are never resolved without trustful give and take on both sides. Now let us begin. Let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new and better world. This is the calling of sons and daughters, and our brothers and sisters and peers alike, who have direct and indirect relations with our impactful number of 301 deaths per day. They wait eagerly for our response. Shall we tell them that the odds are too great? Shall we tell them that the struggle is too hard? Will our message be that the forces of American life resist against their arrival as full men and women, and we send our deepest regrets? Or will there be another message? One of longing, of hope, of solidarity with the yearnings of their commitment to the cause, whatever the cost. The choice is ours, and though we may prefer it otherwise, we must choose in this crucial moment of human history.
It is a powerful representation of the 301 people that we lose every day, and how really, we look towards that government to make all these decisions, and the troops aren't coming. You guys have heard this before. We're the troops. And so we, the people, need to do a lot better job at advocating about understanding and kind of gaining some deeper insight and knowledge on what this epidemic is. And Dr. B, this is another thing I wanted to share, but we can't do it. But Dr. B, one of our favorite guys, right? He made a discussion, and Jimmy asked him, Dr. B, will the opiate epidemic ever be over? And he said, no, it won't be. And he goes through this eloquent way of describing why it will never be solved and how unfortunate that truly is. It's a rough thing to wrap your head around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in 1984 and 85, President Reagan, 85, maybe it was 83, President Reagan declared the war on drugs and kind of ushered in this whole approach on how we're going to end the substance use in America. And the reason why he did that was because it opened up a lot of federal dollars. When you label something a war, you can access a lot.
The war on drugs.
Is what are we really fighting, right? Mm-hmm. We're not fighting the drugs. We're putting people that are using in prison.
And we ended up, fighting individuals. And
it was
created a war. It didn't turn out well.
No, it was a cluster F of non-success. And so now we're rolling into this new thing. And I bumped into an article about fentanyl, and I was reading it, and I noticed, I'm like, this is interesting. But you guys, it was from 9 years ago.
Mm.
And now fentanyl is a common name in discussions, but I think it was called like On the Rise or something. And I'm like, well, yeah, but this was from 9 years ago, where all these warnings were being broadcasted out about this stuff. Mm-hmm. About 7 years ago, we had our first experience with it in Utah, where a young kid up in the Park City area had some shipped to him, and he overdosed and died. And that put fentanyl on the radar here in Utah. But that was 7 years ago. So I'm thinking, there are so many issues with what Dr. B was trying to describe about how it's never going to end.
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah.
So what can we do?
Exactly. And so, with Savannah's discussion and talk, I thought it was really kind of a beautiful just reminder that we can't point fingers at whose job it is to stop it, because we have to do that.
And that comes down to individuals. That comes down to us being educated, educating others with the things that we know, so that there can maybe be safeguards in place, that there can be protective factors given to people that, to keep them safe.
On the flip side too, that one of the things that we were able to do while we were down in southern Utah this last week for spring break with the kids and visiting with family, is that we were able to jump into the Addict II Athlete meeting in St. George with Coach Judy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a cool thing. It was the first time they're getting back outside and meeting at the park so they can go play volleyball and stuff right after.
Yeah.
And, you and I kind of snuck in towards the beginning there to try to sneak and hide on the side. But
be quiet little listeners.
There wasn't a lot of people there, so we stuck out. But the way that Coach Judy kind of kicked off her meeting really resonated with me. And it's funny because when you become a certified sober coach for Team Addict II Athlete and you open a chapter of this program in your community, we want it to become your chapter. You're under the umbrella of Addict II Athlete, but it's your chapter. And
yeah, we teach philosophy and we have strategies and ideas, but we want you to be able to utilize your education and understanding too.
But she did something kind of neat. And, I don't know if we do it a lot. Maybe I should have you jump onto our webpage, because she started off by reading Addict II Athlete's mission, some background on what Addict II Athlete is. And I remember writing this, because we're coming up on what, our 12th year anniversary?
13th.
Our 13th year anniversary coming up next month.
Yeah.
And I remember writing these words, and I don't revisit them as much as I probably should. We kind of forget, like, back then what we were creating. Mm-hmm. And so as Coach Judy was having the athletes read, the literature that is kind of like the mission statement of Addict II Athlete and, what we stand for and what we do, I was brought to tears because I'm we don't talk about this. And we get this question a lot. What is Addict II Athlete, right? You want to share with them a little bit about what the mission is and the philosophy, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
So our mission is to establish and maintain recovery by promoting lifestyle changes through erasing addiction and replacing it with things of greater value. Our message is clear: to erase addiction and replace it with things of greater value, such as health, recreation, service, relationships, and team unity, to turn the mess of addiction into the message of health, wellness, and recovery.
So you look at that and our mission statement. I remember getting a lecture from a professor about mission statements and how important they are. And I remember writing that, and we've condensed it a little bit. We've changed it just ever so slightly.
But it stayed the same.
Mostly,
yeah. Then our philosophy. The Addict II Athlete mission is to establish and maintain recovery by promoting lifestyle changes. Our vision is that in moving from an addict to an athlete, the individual creates inner change. We then have the courage to make those changes, developing a sense of integrity with a willingness to see past mistakes as opportunities for growth. We promote well-balanced lifestyle changes. We will stand unified through perseverance to awaken the champion within, to go forth in recovery and serve. In A to A, we believe recovery is part of the process, but does not need to last an entire lifetime. The definition of recovery is a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. The action or process of regaining possession or control of something stolen or lost. Once you have been able to regain control of the self and the addiction, you can move forward in life as a champion of recovery. It's so interesting to go back, and I don't know why I don't go back there and read this stuff as much as I should. Again, it's probably all bouncing around up there in that melon of mine, but our philosophy is fairly unique when it comes to the way that we approach recovery, don't you think? Yeah. I think we have a lot of, we're individually based, and I don't know. I like it.
Yeah. And I really do appreciate, Judy opening up with some of this. And then the last thing she read was defining a champion. And it was cool because I was able to share with the athletes that were attending, like, why this is even in our literature, and it kind of came back from the mindset of, I had so much admiration and appreciation for these folks I was working with when Addict II Athletes started to get, established, that calling them an addict just didn't fit right with me, didn't feel right,
Yeah.
And I remember my mentor and colleague, Bruce Chandler, was talking to me a little bit about being willing to share Addict II Athletes' mission in an upcoming conference at the Utah Valley University. And I was really apprehensive about doing that because I was trying to kind of keep it under the radar, because I thought if too many people know we're doing this, then someone's going to tell us we can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes you look at what we've been doing and we just think, somebody's going to say we're doing it wrong when we had that happen.
Yeah.
So then it's hard to keep going forward. No, I know this is right. And I know we need it without feeling like people will pick it apart or, attack us somehow.
One of the heartburn moments that we got, and we do occasionally now, but not as much, is that when we were told we're doing it wrong, it was coming from the establishment of the very consistent groups, some of those anonymous groups. And, they looked at this new kid on the block and we're doing a little bit of turf guarding. But to me, I never felt right calling someone an addict because it's such a negative connotation. And we've had a few coaches that would ask this question, like, why do you then still use that word from time to time? And a lot of it's sports because the narrative, hasn't shifted as fast as what we'd like it to be.
Yeah,
but
like
also,
trying to speak and have the general public understand us with our new terminology. So it's hard.
And so, but by using that, you'll hear us use the word addict from time to time, but it's not meant to degrade or whatnot, it's to identify. But when I was putting this presentation together to kind of like officially put Addict II Athlete out there to the powers that be, like these professionals, I was looking for a word that I could use to describe them instead of addicts and, even athletes, because even athletes is, it's a good name, but like what encapsulates all of that? And we settled on the term champion. And so we wrote a thing in our literature defining what a champion is. And when you hear this, I want you to think of it not as a ball player or an athlete, but as a person overcoming addiction.
Yeah. So defining a champion, Addict II Athlete does not recognize individuals in active recovery as addicts. Instead, we describe them as champions. We do not discriminate against individuals identifying as such, but have them understand a greater purpose behind identifying with a positive attribute rather than a negative connotation. Thus, the definition of a champion is a person who has defeated or surpassed all rivals in the competition, especially in sports. We further assist individuals to understand the definition of champion by the following attributes. An Addict II Athlete champion is someone who discovers how great he or she can become, talks soft yet plays big, loves the battle more than the victory, goes through the fire to reach their goals, always competes with purpose and passion, learns from losses, lives in the present moment, focuses on daily improvement, does not base self-worth on the scoreboard.
So when you think about that level of commitment to your recovery, would you not define yourself as a champion, right? Loves the battle more than the game.
Yeah.
That understands that losses are just opportunities for other victories.
Daily improvement, being present.
Yeah. Talks soft, yet plays big, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of an interesting principle too. I remember thinking about that one when we wrote it, and it was kind of like to be able to be taken seriously. That's why a couple of weeks ago, I was a guest on another podcast, and it's the funniest thing because I don't ever war story. I never talk about my own battle with addiction. I don't get into the nooks and crannies of the trauma and some of the stuff that went down. And I even skip out on some of the things that I think I look at as, well, that was just an experience, where others will look at it and be like, holy crap, man, like I cannot believe that you did that. And so to train yourself to talk soft, to not like war story, to be like, oh yeah, well, top this one. There's good and bad in that, but plays big. And I think that the playing big is so important. And playing big in your recovery means that you're showing up, right? That you're advocating for yourself and for others. You're being that teammate. You're being that person that shows up first and leaves last. And those are the kind of attributes that I think make an individual an amazing athlete. And subsequently, the same principles apply to someone that's pursuing sobriety.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to give Judy, Coach Judy of the St. George chapter, just a shout out and just
awesome.
Thank her for that, because I wasn't expecting that. You want, when we train our coaches, for them to be able to utilize the foundation of what the team stands for, but to make it their own. And she's done that.
Yeah. It sounds like they share that every week, and that's an awesome way to like remind everyone like who we are and what we're about and where we're going. So,
it leads into another little discussion about what the Addict II Athlete Certified Sober Coach is. You hear a lot of tainted mindsets when it comes to life coaching and stuff, and I'm not the biggest fan of life coaching. I think that there are some situations by which they do pretty well, but sometimes that fall short because someone thinks that maybe they'll be able to use a talent they have to teach others and coach others how to become that as well. And the thing that I think differentiates Addict II Athlete Sober Coach training to open a chapter is you're legitimately a coach. You're not just a guru or like a...
Yeah. Well, and it's a more focused, like life coaching is very open, very general. And we try to, most of the people that take our training and utilize it are peers that have been through lived experience similar, or family members, and they have a way to relate and understand this population. And I think that makes things really helpful for other people.
Yeah. And so, we have, how many trained coaches do we have now? Just estimate. You don't need to give the...
Oh, I think it was like 36. Something like that we've trained in and
out of the state of Utah. Yeah. And To me, it's kind of one of those things that Dr. Paul talked about with why we felt it was important to do this. And Dr. Paul was talking about a time that he was attending a conference where, which I think his name is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's I think one of the reporters for CNN or something was being a speaker there. And Paul said that as they were kind of wrapping up, they were asking questions, like they do, like, do you have any questions? And one guy in the back stands up and says, hey, Dr. Gupta, I want to know what the most tragic thing you've seen and experienced is, because Dr. Sanjay Gupta is the one that goes out and reports on all the natural disasters. If there's a hurricane or an earthquake or a landslide, he's usually there talking about the medical concerns and things of that nature.
The aid that we can send, yeah.
Yeah. When I first heard that someone asked me that, I thought, that's kind of grisly. Why would you want to know that, right?
He's probably seen some awful things.
But Dr. Paul said something beautiful that he said, and the way that he interpreted it in turn kind of got me thinking that I wanted to do the same. But Dr. Gupta said to this guy in the audience, he said, the most difficult and challenging and heartbreaking thing I see when I go to these things and go to these places and these natural disasters is the unnecessary death. And everyone kind of cocked their head and leaned in a little bit like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And he said, when there's a tragedy like this, the tsunami, an earthquake, a landslide, a hurricane, we know there's going to be death. We know this.
Yeah, you expect it.
Unfortunately, that's the way the world works. It's what nature does. He said, but the death that really goes without, expecting, and the unnecessary death is when the cargo ships arrive with all of the supplies and all the medical items and everything this community is going to need, but there's no plan on how to get it out there.
Yeah.
So it just sits in the harbor on the boat while the people suffer.
Or the airport, and we can't get the application of it and getting it to the people that need it.
Yeah, it's just non-existent. And so the unnecessary death, when it's all sitting right there, is the hardest thing. And Dr. Paul shared that with me and kind of explained the same mindset that I had with that when I heard it. And that's here on Addict II Athletes, we created this program. We're like that ship, right? Sitting there. And the only way we're going to be able to help the folks out there is to offload this information and get it out there to the minds and the communities and the people that can bring it to their hometown.
And some it may help and some it may not, but we want to get it to those that it can touch.
Yeah. And so by putting together our online training and whatnot and getting these coaches, you start to have these experiences like Coach Judy down there has, and so many other coaches that we've trained that has these experiences. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of one of those things that as it grows and as it gets bigger, I kind of hope that we'll be able to keep enough of a connection by which we could sneak into other people's meetings and be like those flies on the wall, because I love seeing people be able to produce this stuff with their own niche, with their own community, and that title of coach should be taken very seriously.
Yeah, we love it. We're very grateful for all of our coaches that give so much to their communities throughout Utah and beyond.
We couldn't do it without them. That's absolutely true. Thinking outside the box there's a few things that just kind of struck the chords with me that I wanted to share with you, the listeners. But for our one question today, we have enough time for this. I got a little bit blowhardy on that, Marissa. Our one question, the terms of overthinking, of like getting in a situation where, there's a catastrophizing end to every outlet that you try to create for any situation. And overthinking can really be a challenge when you're in recovery, because now your mind starts to be occupied with more than one pursuit. And so now you're starting to think of all the things that you might have dropped the ball with, everything that may be expected of you. And overthinking eventually turns into anxiety. And I love the definition of anxiety leaning towards the simplicity of just worrying about the future, things that haven't happened yet, where depression is kind of the stuff that you should have, could have, would have in the past that you can't go back and fix, just like you can't fix the future unless you're in the here and now. Anxiety and overthinking are a marriage made in hell, really.
Yeah. So just worrying about something you can't control yet, or the depression, things that you can't change. So,
And when I used to see this all the time, when I was working at the county with folks, and they'd have upcoming court dates and whatnot, and they would overthink and catastrophize the most heinous and horrible outcome. And 99.9% of the time, nothing like that would ever happen. Yeah. And it got me thinking, why would you guys future trip that deep when you know that worst scenario that you created isn't going to happen? But we do that as a self-preservating mind.
And I think sometimes some of those worst things have happened, and that's why individuals, and myself included, will look forward and think this is going to happen again, or how could it not be just as bad as back then. But it's difficult to also put yourself in that, and it's good to think forward, and you need to be prepared, and that's why our brains and bodies do that, to be prepared and be ready. But if it's becoming detrimental to your mental health, to your here and now, to anything, then you've got to find ways to address it.
Ways that we coach and teach this too is to, first and foremost, be able to practice some mindfulness to be able to stay in the present moment, which is kind of a, what the F does that mean, right? Because, you hear this a lot, and it's kind of a catchphrase now, like be present, be mindful. It's like the Buddhist philosophy, right? But think about that. It means like there's nothing you can do about it right now. Why are we worrying about it? What should we be focusing on? What's important now? Coach Larry Garowicz called that going for the win every day. What's important now? That's a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Oh, it's really hard. But I think it takes practice, whether that's slowing down and just breathing, focusing on your breathing, counting, like something that will just bring you here. Is really important. Some people use mindfulness into grounding experiences, whether it's the 5 senses, identify something you see, smell, hear, taste, and are touching. And that's a way to like bring it to here and now instead of jumping ahead. You know
what the easiest solution is to break that little bit of an anxiety-driven cycle? Is to go grab you a couple of Sour Patch Kids and pop those in your mouth. Sounds so dumb because you're like, what in the crap? So you're telling me that if I eat some sour candy, I'm not going to be anxious? And the answer is yes, you will not be. Do you know why? Because your mind has thinking about something else. Your mind's like, what the F is this? Yeah. And it's the funniest thing. And I'm not talking about like eating gobs and gobs and gobs of them, right? I got a lot of anxiety. But it will redirect your thinking. It's kind of like slowing down and just thinking about, it's kind of like Caesar, right? The dog walker guy. Yes. What does he teach about that? Because it's exactly the same principle. Yeah. So Caesar's like, I think they call him the dog whisperer. And he always talks about, dogs get into some kind of, it's like a mode, like rumination, where they just repeat something. And that's, whether it's barking, like somebody comes to the door and the dog just barks. And it's like a hamster on a hamster wheel, and just keeps going and going. And the only way to do it, he always says, just tap them on like the rib cage or something. And that just helps short circuit the brain from that repetition to, oh, what are you doing? Yeah. And help it's like redirect. Give them a nudge, right? If you're on the leash, just give them a little bit of a tug, not like a yank, but like a little bit of a tug, just to be like, let them reset. Yeah. Because our brains, as much as we think they are amazing, like processors and we can multitask, we can't. Our brains don't work that way. So introducing something like a sour candy when you're experiencing some pretty severe anxiety or overthinking, it will rewire that path. Like, what is this now? And that'll give you a little bit of time to start, maybe applying some self-soothing techniques, such as, like Marissa says, like the grounding, like to really kind of let that stuff go. Yeah. And I've coached a lot of folks on setting, specific time limits for decision making, which sounds kind of funny. Like, what does that mean? It means that, like, come to a decision, make a decision. Yeah. When we're constantly deciding what we're going to do, we're never going to make it. So to make a decision means that you're cutting open, you're cutting in, and you're removing. It's a decision, right? An incision means you're cutting in. A decision means you're cutting out. So make your decision. People get stuck in that deciding mode, and you miss the boat sometimes. Yeah, if you're just waiting or worrying, if I do this, will this happen? If I worry about that, sometimes you just have to do it. Like, you've got to jump at some point and just go. Being able to kind of challenge those negative thoughts about, overthinking for the future and that future tripping by actively replacing them with positive ones is hilarious, and it works really well. But the problem is that you have to believe what you're saying. So it's just like if you were coming in for EMDR therapy, if you've ever been into EMDR therapy, there's a spot where the therapist will ask you, what negative thoughts have you had as a result of this? And you just negative connotation. It's something that you've learned to believe, and defaulted to the negative. So I am unlovable or whatnot. And so in a situation where you're overthinking, it could be, I don't have enough money for this, bill that's coming up.
Yeah.
And I love this because as I've talked and counseled with people, again, it's from Dr. Paul, it taught me to work on these principles. I remember a certain situation that I was involved in when I was serving in clergy, and an individual came up to me and said that we're really worried about, not having our car payment this month, and we're not going to have enough. I said, how much do you have right now? How much do you have right now? And they're like, we don't have anything. I'm like, well, what do you need right now? Like right now, what do you need? They're all, nothing. Like right now, as we're sitting in my office, you don't need anything? And they're like, nah, I guess not really. I'm like, when you go home in a half hour, 45 minutes, are you going to need money then? They're like, no, not really. And as we started breaking it down to this monumental future trip of like, we're not going to be able to pay this car payment, that was causing anger and frustration and scarcity and fear and anxiety. Yeah. It was taking away from what was going on right now. You can't really even think clearly when that happens. Yeah. And so, I was like, well, we know now that there's an obstacle out there, but right now we're okay. We're going to go for the win. And we did. We sat there and problem solved on how we could get that accomplished. But like just by worrying about what's coming, you get stuck, Yeah. So instead of, I don't have enough money for this, what if it was like, I have enough for what I need right now? Even if it's just for that moment, that'll give your mind enough clarity to open up a new pathway on like, okay, so how am I going to do this? We're great problem solvers if we give ourselves the time.
The bill's not due today, so let's enjoy the here and now. And
absolutely.
Figure out something else.
It was kind of an interesting discussion. One of the best things you can do when you're in this overthinking mindset, if we're going to get back to the very basics, it's almost like the standard issue for everyone. Get physical. Movement equals healing.
Yes.
Engage in some physical activity to clear your mind. The last couple of days, I've spent the mornings getting my butt here. One day was running 13.4 miles, and today was cycling,
running,
mountain biking.
Work.
Yeah, 12.1. It's amazing the difference of mindset I have when I roll in here than when I drive in and then run here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a wild thing I'm noticing. It's only been 2 days. Not like I'm going to solve the world's problems, but I'm like, that time, like when you're moving, it opens up a lot of doors.
It helps you think clearly. It does bring you to the here and now, and so that you can focus on here and now, and then maybe address something in the future in a better way, just with clearer thought.
Another thing that we coach and teach when we do, be cautious of overthinking, it's to focus on solutions rather than dwelling on the problems. Now, this is one of the hardest things to do. Because again, we get that fear mindset of like what scarcity would be if, when, how, and why. And we don't think about solutions. We don't look at like how to problem solve. And a lot of times we get so stuck in that we want other people to do that for us.
Yeah. Rather than, challenging those thoughts. And, Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like this, again, we've been quoting Dr. Paul a lot. Dr. Paul talks a little bit about this acorn that falls from an oak tree, right? That acorn has everything it needs inside of it to create another oak tree.
A huge tree.
Right?
Yeah.
All it needs is some simple things. It needs to be on the ground, right?
Needs to have
and it needs to gather that water from the ground.
Dirt, water, sunlight.
When it falls on the ground, guess what it does? It makes those things happen, right? It gets pushed in there. Sometimes a bird might grab it or maybe one of them dumb squirrels and they'll move it away. But eventually that thing's going to be a tree. You have the same principles inside you. You have everything you need inside of you to solve every problem that comes along if you allow yourself to do it.
And start trusting yourself. Trust in yourself and what you have. And maybe that is educating yourself more in certain areas so that you feel more confident in being able to address certain things. But you have the resources and it's time to try it.
It's time to try it. And last but not least, if you get stuck in any of those, reach out, talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist, talk to somebody that you trust, that you're able to maybe help, invite in to help you problem solve. And don't let them do it for you, but invite them in to use them as a resource, and maybe like a brainstorming session.
Yeah.
And you can do that by jumping on addict2athlete.org underneath the resources tab and email Marissa or I.
Yeah,
and many of our coaches. That's what they're all trained for.
Yeah. So
just a little bit of a hodgepodge episode today. Talk a little bit about all that. We will be posting Savannah's talk within this podcast because I really want you guys to hear it, just because of how beautiful she and eloquently she describes us standing up to help that 301 people that pass away every day to overdose.
It's amazing.
Be dwindled down to zero.
Yeah.
Final thoughts for you, Miss Marissa?
Have a great day.
Absolutely. Athletes, thanks so much for all that you do. Share this podcast with anyone that may be struggling. We'll see you next time here on Overtime. Until then, turn your mess into your message.